apologetics, and evangelism. Learn from Ravi Zacharias, Josh McDowell, Chip Ingram, and more than 60 other speakers at Southern Evangelical Seminary's 25th Annual National Conference on Christian Apologetics. It's October 12th and 13th in Charlotte, North Carolina. Get the early bird discount when you register by August 1st at ses.edu.
Brian Fisher of the American Family Association.
Brian Fisher.
Brian Fisher.
Brian Fisher.
Brian Fisher.
Brian Fisher.
Brian Fisher. Brian Fisher. Brian Fisher. Brian Fisher.
I agree with Brian Fisher of the American Family Association, who blogged Where Angels Fear to Tweet.
Brian Fisher, the right-winger, thinks he's starring in his own episode of Mad Men.
It's one thing for Brian Fisher to be talking about the homosexual agenda. It's another thing for him to be talking about, wanting to put up the 10 Commandments somewhere. One of those things. But Brian Fisher is talking about grizzly bears.
That's the way you got to shoot them.
That's comedy. That's not politics, and that's definitely not religion.
Brian Fisher doesn't know how to run for office. He's just running his mouth. Fisher couldn't be prouder of his backward behavior.
I sort of think that Brian Fisher might be revealed one day as a hilarious, gay drag poet.
Freedom prospers when religion is vibrant and the rule of law under God is acknowledged. An informed patriot is what we want.
Welcome to American Family Radio's Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio.
Muscular Christianity.
Where we relentlessly explore the intersection of truth and politics.
The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
Now, here's your host, Brian Fisher.
Well, howdy and welcome to a brand new broadcast edition of Focal Point on the American Family Radio Network. You might have wondered what that intro was all about. That was Jeff having way too much fun.
Yeah, it was.
This is the 9th anniversary of Focal Point. Our first Focal Point program was aired exactly 9 years ago on this date in 2009. So we are celebrating our 9th birthday, and Jeff put together a little montage. I don't know. I heard Ed Schultz in there. I heard Rachel Maddow in there. Stephen Colbert was in there.
Yeah, we could have went. We could have the list. The memories go way back.
And you notice they all had very nice complimentary things to say about me. In fact, I think finding any kind of media source that had a complimentary thing to say about me would be just about impossible. So anyway,
I didn't spend much time looking for
the friendly one.
But you know what? Rob and I and a few of the staff put together. We recorded this earlier on today, and we just wanted to put this together and do this for you. So
all right, well, great.
Happy anniversary, happy anniversary, happy anniversary, happy anniversary. Pour a cheerful toast and fill it, happy anniversary. But be careful you don't spill it, happy anniversary. Oh, happy anniversary, happy anniversary, happy anniversary, happy anniversary.
I have only one thing to say. I said thank you way too soon for that.
That was not... Rob and the staff here at AFA, that was for the Flintstones, but ours wasn't too bad.
Yeah,
ours was
Barney
pretty good.
And Fred and Wilma and all, and Pebbles.
And you know what? It's pretty bad when you can't outdo the Flintstones for an anniversary song. But we did get the whoa part down. That was pretty good.
Whoa.
Yeah.
He went way up. I'll let him handle that part.
Okay, well, Jeff auditioning for something there.
It has been a fun ride, Brian. It has been a great 9 years. It doesn't even feel like it, really. I mean...
Well, and I think the three of us, we have been pretty much together from the very beginning, if I remember.
Yeah.
You guys came on board real early in the program. Rob, were you with me on day one?
Yeah, our jobs sort of switched around a little bit because I was doing video only at the time, and Jeff was running this and producing, and now he's producing, and I'm over here and cooking some video too.
Were you with us from day one? Too?
I remember the first day that you actually came in on another show, and they were kind of debuting you to see what you were like and who was going to be the best producer to work with you, and nobody else wanted to. So I've been here.
A well-hidden secret finally emerges after 9 years.
Now, I do remember one time that they decided to switch me off the show early on, and it really hurt. And I really didn't want to go. And very quickly they switched that back. I do remember that. I felt like God had a special call for us to be together and for somebody to not do what they wanted to in producing the show, but to help you do what you needed to do. And hopefully that's what Rob and I have been able to do for you.
Yeah.
And you have encouraged and been not only a great boss, but a great friend to us and our family. Our lives are much better for it.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Well, that makes my day.
Well, it's the truth.
Yeah, and I want to tell you guys what a joy it's been to work with you for 9 years. I do not know how many broadcast teams, even of this size, stick together for almost a decade. Yeah. I mean, I would think that would be pretty much a rarity in the radio.
We've only had
industry.
2 fights the whole 9 years, and both of those were Rob's fault.
Of course. I take full responsibility. That's my job here, is take full responsibility.
To be an instigator.
No, we've had no blowouts whatsoever that I remember.
When he first walked in over here, you know, I was like, who's this white-headed John Wayne coming in out here?
Yeah, he would look like a gunslinger.
Yeah,
walking
I
in
said,
from the
where's
west.
his guns? I started looking for the 6 guns on the side, you know. But it's been a pleasure, Brian, and you are a brother in Christ and also a good friend. And I appreciate that. You mentored me a lot in God's Word, and I appreciate that.
Well, thank you, Rob. It's been a pleasure to work with you. Jeff, can't tell you how much I appreciate what you've meant to me personally, what you've meant to the show. Same for Rob, to kind of support the extra mile. You guys go the extra mile all the time. I keep throwing extra work on you guys on occasion, and you'll just you just do it. You know, Rob sometimes will kind of sag under weight, but
that's why they call me the old bear.
Yeah, we're gonna go in and poke him with a stick.
Yeah, but you know, Rob never complains. He just shoulders the burden, and then after the program, and he comes in and says, "If you ever do that to me," no, he doesn't.
And it's surprising.
He'll let me know if the load is too heavy, but
you know,
he gets
another
it done.
thing that's really surprising is how many listeners you've had for that 9 years. Yeah. I mean, there are people that can think back. I wish we had the very first program. We could play some highlights.
No. I've got that somewhere. You do not want to hear that. That's probably the worst example of talk radio in the history of broadcasting since Marconi.
Were you nervous?
Oh, yeah. I'd never done talk radio before, never had my own show. Man, I was so tight. Man, I was seriously
You had
tight.
video on you, too, at the same time.
Yeah. I have never had 1 ounce of inclination to go back and listen to that. Absolutely no chance.
Well,
that was horrible radio.
We just burned up your first segment.
Yeah, we took care of that.
Yeah. Well, anyway, that was fun. That was a nice little surprise, all except for the Flintstones thing. But I appreciate that a lot. In fact, we've got a couple of I picked a couple of sound bites, a little more at length from some of the things that happened over the course of the program. And I think, do we have time for one before the... Yeah, let's do, this is Ed Schultz, clip number 1. He had a little section on his program called The Pretenders. Let's listen.
And in Pretenders tonight, design flaw. Brian Fisher, the right-winger, thinks he's starring in his own episode of Mad Men. Fisher says he likes to put women in their place right at the secretary's desk. The conservative radio host says it's all a part of God's design. Discrimination laws are just getting in the way.
I think God has designed women for the primary outlet for their creativity, their energy, their love, their personality to be in making a home for their husbands and children. Are they obligated? Are they commanded, ordered by God to do that? No. But I believe that is God's basic design. That's how we design male and female to work together. When I went to hire a receptionist, when I went to hire a secretary, when I went to hire somebody who was going to answer the phones for a church, and I said, guys, don't bother applying. I absolutely discriminated on the basis of gender. You want to come and sue me? Equal Opportunity Employment Commission, knock yourself out.
I wonder if Mike Rogers' talk show is going to be like that. Anyway, Fisher couldn't be prouder of his backward behavior. Brian Fisher doesn't know how to run for office. He's just running his mouth. If Brian Fisher thinks being godly means being gross, he can keep on pretending.
So that's Ed Schultz, the closest we came to some kind of complimentary example we could bring you.
You've been running your mouth for 9 years now.
And what I was talking about there is the way God has designed the difference between men and women. And when I talked about discriminating on the basis of gender, I said, look, I want a female answering the phone because of the welcoming presence that a female creates as God intended her to do. We'll be right back.
Hi, this is Dan Celia from Financial Issues. You know, the charitable gift annuity concept is more important today than probably ever. It is something that you have heard me talk about for many, many years. And right now, for now, the tax code is still allowing charitable organizations to establish a charitable gift annuity so that you can be guaranteed permanent income for the rest of your life. Don't waste any time. So many of you have IRAs, 401k money. Peel off a piece of that. Establish your charitable gift annuity so that you have a portion of permanent income that you know is never going to change for the rest of your life. Would you do it today? Call AFA Foundation, 800-326-4543, extension 345. That's 800-326-4543, extension 345.
See to it that no one takes you captive through hollow and deceptive philosophy. My name is Abraham Hamilton III, and this is the Hamilton Minute. When families are arrested and separated after attempting to enter the U.S. illegally, 54% of likely American voters say the parents are more to blame for breaking the law, according to Rasmussen. Only 35% believe the federal government is more to blame for enforcing the law. This once again shows the great disconnect between the talking snake media and the American people. The press has its First Amendment protections because the founders saw their function as critical to keeping our leaders accountable. Today, the mainstream media is nothing more than PR for regressivism.
Listen each weekday from 5 to 6 p.m. Central for the Hamilton Corner. For more from Abraham Hamilton III, Public Policy Analyst for the American Family Association.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio.
Howdy, and welcome back to this 9th anniversary edition of Focal Point on American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name, congenial, convivial, amiable, and effervescent, as always. And the program is Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio. And you are listening to the American Family Radio Network, the most dangerous radio network in all of America. Glad to have you in the conversation. Want to turn our attention from the ridiculous to the sublime, turning from CNN to the Word of God. By the way, Ed Schultz died yesterday. Very sorry to hear that. He was 64, still a young guy, died of natural causes. I know he had a fairly young son who's probably an adult now, but certainly our hearts and condolences go out to Ed Schultz and to his family. And he was a guy that started out in radio as a conservative. And by the time he finished, he had switched completely 180 degrees to where he was a very rabid liberal. Bernie Sanders was his favorite guest on his program. So anyway, our thoughts and prayers definitely with Ed Schultz and his family as they deal with his loss. I do not know if that was a surprise. He's only 64, and he seemed to me like he was always in good health, so I do not know any more details about what happened, but certainly our thoughts are with his family as they deal with that. That had to be, even at 64, you just don't expect that that young. All right, well, let's turn our attention to the Word of God. You know, to introduce what we're going to talk about today, yeah, I'm sure there are people, I mean, I'm even talking to myself when we talk about this, people that are going through sort of a very dry time in your life. You're kind of thirsty, and your thirst for whatever it is you're thirsting for doesn't quite seem to be satisfied. And I want to kind of introduce the Isaiah 29 by using that kind of as the backstory. We're going to come back to that as we get toward the end of the conversation. But in Isaiah 29 and Isaiah 30, he's talking about something I think that we can see around us in our own nation. And this is a divine thing. The scriptures talk about God pouring out this Spirit. And this is what God says in chapter 29 of Isaiah, verse 10. He says, look, God has poured out on the land a spirit of deep sleep, a spirit of slumber. And that's what Isaiah is talking about here in this early part of chapter 29. And I think that's true in our case, in our nation. The Lord has poured out on our people, a huge segment of our population, a spirit of deep sleep. He's closed the eyes of the prophets. He has covered the heads of the seers, those who are supposed to see, those who are supposed to have insight, those who are supposed to instruct the people. The prophets and the seers cannot see what's right in front of them. So the spiritual leaders that are supposed to awaken their people from the spirit of deep sleep have themselves been deceived. And so their congregations are like blind people trying to lead other blind people, because all of them have been deceived by the spirit of slumber. Now he says in verses 11 and 12, the vision of all this has become to you like the words of a book that is sealed. So the scriptures have become to many people in America like a book that's just a closed book to them, and everybody has an excuse not to open this sealed book. This is what Isaiah says. If you give the book to one who can read, he says, I can't because it's sealed. The book is sealed. I can't read it because it's sealed. If you give the book to somebody who cannot read it, he would and say, read this. He says, I can't read. So the book is unsealed, but I can't read. This guy over here says the book is sealed and I can't open it, therefore I can't read. So everybody has got an excuse not to look into the Word of God. And so he says this in verse 13, the Lord said, because this people draw near with their mouth and honor me with their lips, while their hearts are far from me, and their fear of me is a commandment taught by men. So you look around today, we see people still going through the motions. They're going to church, they're singing the hymns, they're listening to the sermon, but it's all a show, it's all a charade. They honor God with their mouth. You listen to the words they mindlessly repeat, and it sounds good, but their hearts are somewhere else. Their hearts are far from God, and their minds are even further away from engaging with God. So we look at this around us. Now we see that everybody's asleep, everybody's nodding off. Even the people that are supposed to be our spiritual leaders seem to be blinded and asleep like everybody else, and so it seems like there is no hope. But Isaiah says God is simply setting the stage to do something remarkable. He says in verse 13, the Lord said, this people draw near with their mouth, while their hearts are far from me. He says, verse 14, therefore, behold, I will again do wonderful things with this people, with wonder upon wonder. So what you expect Isaiah to say is, because the people's hearts are far from me, I'm going to make things even worse for them. God doesn't say that. Their hearts are far from me, but I'm just setting the stage to again do wonderful things with this people. And he says in verse 14, the wisdom of their wise men shall perish, and the discernment of their discerning men shall be hidden. So in other words, his point is, people will suddenly begin to see, because of the work of God, they will suddenly begin to see how empty and muddled and confused and deceived the thinking of the really smart people are. And they will see that their spiritual leaders have been turning everything upside down. That's an expression that Isaiah used. You have turned everything upside down. He says this, you turn things upside down. Shall the potter be regarded as the clay, that the thing made should say of its maker, he did not make me, or the thing formed say of him who formed it, he has no understanding. So they will begin to see that people have this just upside down, that their leaders are saying, well, God has no understanding, he doesn't know what he's talking about, And the people begin to see through that and said, no, he is the source of all wisdom, and this book contains all the wisdom that we need for life. So God is getting ready to open the minds of people, you know, and what they've done is they've turned the potter, who is God, into the clay. So what they are doing with God is they are molding him into their image rather than allowing God to mold them into his image. So people are out there denying that there is a creator, denying that he knows anything about what he's talking about, denying that there's a God who made them, and that the stuff he wants us to believe is all foolish. But Isaiah says in a short time, God is going to begin to reverse that. It says in verse 17, is it not yet a very little while until Lebanon shall be turned into a fruitful field? In that day, verse 18, the deaf shall hear the words of a book, the words of this book, and out of their gloom and darkness the eyes of the blind shall see. So all of a sudden, the words of the book will start to make sense to people who have been blinded to it and deaf to it, whereas they were deaf before. Now their ears are open, and they will love to listen to solid teaching from the book. And you probably know people like that. There was a time when they weren't anywhere with regard to God, and now their eyes light up when they think about the Word of God. They love to worship God. They love to fellowship together with other believers, and you find it hard even to believe the transformation. So the eyes of those who were blind and who were spiritually listless, their eyes are now open, and they are able to see things in the Word they have never seen before. So he says in verse 19, the meek shall obtain fresh joy in the Lord, and the poor among mankind shall exult in the Holy One of Israel. So here's a word coming full circle in our discussion today. Here's a word for people who are listless and joyless. You're going through kind of a flat period in your life. There doesn't seem to be any joy, doesn't seem to be any life. Life is kind of dull and flat. Life doesn't seem to offer much pizzazz. Well, here is the promise. You're in a perfect place for God to do something terrific for you. His joy, Isaiah says, is available to the meek. Now, the word for meek in Hebrew means to be poor, afflicted, or humble. So this is a word, a promise for those who are empty. And if in our emptiness we bow before God and we hold out to Him our empty hands and our empty souls, and we ask Him to fill us up with fresh joy, not a stale joy, not a pretend joy, but something fresh and new, and the poor, that is the spiritually empty, the spiritually bankrupt, he says, will exult in the Holy One of Israel, not because of a change in circumstances, but simply because we know God. We will find fresh joy in God Himself, not just in what He does for us, but just in Him. Over in chapter 30, verse 15, he says, in returning and rest you shall be saved, in quietness and trust shall be your strength. So rest also means quietness. It means that we take time to simply and quietly rest before the Lord. Rest in His presence without feeling like we have to do something. We stop doing and we start abiding. We stop running and start resting, and that's where God will meet us and fill us with fresh joy. Well, let's go to prayer, pray some of these things back to God. Lord God, we bow before you and acknowledge your holiness as the Holy One of Jacob, and we stand in awe of you as the God of Israel. We bring our cities and our nation before you. We confess that we have been like obstinate children, and that we have carried out plans that are not yours, and formed alliances that are not of your Spirit. We have heaped sin upon sin, and we acknowledge that if we continue, we will be put to shame by depending on things that bring us neither help nor advantage. We confess, Lord, that many among us go to great depths to hide their plans from you and to do their work in darkness, thinking that no one sees and no one knows. We have turned things upside down as if the potter were thought to be like the clay. We have left the way and turned aside from the path. I pray for myself, for my family, for the listening audience of Focal Point, everyone within the sound of my voice. I pray that we will draw near to you with our mouths, honor you with our lips, but have hearts that are close to you. Pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
This is Dr. Richard Land, president of Southern Evangelical Seminary. Welcome to Bringing Every Thought Captive. The American political left is in a frenzy. Justice Kennedy has retired, so President Trump is in the process of selecting someone to nominate to be his successor on the U.S. Supreme Court, the highest court in the land. The liberal establishment in the country is beside itself. They are running around like Chicken Little, screaming, "The sky is falling, the sky is falling." Why? Because with this appointment, the ideological balance on the high court shifts decidedly to a strict constructionist, original intent philosophy. The chief consequence will be a much less intrusive, much less interventionist court, one that asks what was the original intent of the founding fathers, not what the current justices decide is best for the nation. For too much of the latter half of the 20th century and the first quarter of the 21st century, the Supreme Court majority has believed in the Constitution as a, quote, living document, end quote, into which the justices could read their own convictions and views and discover previously undiscovered rights, some would say fabricated rights, in the document. For example, as Chief Justice Roberts opined in the decision legalizing same-sex marriage, make no mistake, this decision has nothing to do with the Constitution. It has to do with 5 unelected lawyers imposing their definition of marriage on the country. That's coming to an end. The liberals have enjoyed imposing their social agenda on the nation for 2 generations through judicial legislation, and now they see their tyranny is coming to an end, thankfully, and they hate it. So they are attacking all the potential nominees. Actually, if a judge is a strict constructionist, original intent jurist, he or she is going to judge each case according to the intent of the original founders, surrendering their own religious convictions to their oath of office to defend what the law and Constitution says, not what they wished it had said. That's what a judge is supposed to do, defend the Constitution and the law. If they want to change it, they should resign and run for Congress. This is Richard Land.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio. Listen to the audio podcast or download today's program at afr.net. You can also read Brian Fisher's columns at afa.net. afa.net.
Howdy, and welcome back to this 9th anniversary edition of Focal Point on American Family Radio. We had some people following us on live stream on Facebook. I think somebody said I ought to get a raise.
Yeah, they did. Yes.
Okay, well, let's be sure and forward that to management.
I don't want to follow up on that because I think they were implying you deserve a raise for working with me and Rob for 9 years. So
that's the way I read it.
You know, and that's actually a pretty good point. It's kind of hazardous duty pay. Yeah, you know, the guys that have the really tough jobs, they get extra pay for that.
Yep. That might end up.
That might be it.
Job.
Yeah. So. Let's do the next. Oh, and Jeff, you had done a little bit of calculation about just what 9 years means in terms of broadcasting.
It's really surprising. I mean, that's 2,358 days, and your program is 2 hours long, so that turns into 4,716 hours on the air. That's not including the extra shows you do during Share-a-thon and when you're guests on other shows, and we also replay some of your shows. So, I mean, there's a lot of airtime. We're probably close to 5,000 hours on the air, and still talking.
Still talking.
Yeah.
You know, and it's a quick 9 years. I mean, it just seems like it's gone just like in a blur.
Time flies, yeah.
Time flies.
Sure. A lot of stuff's happened
when you're having
when you
fun.
Think back at it. I remember you being the pastor at my son's wedding, my oldest son's wedding.
Mm-hmm.
You've been through some things yourself. We've done a lot of golfing. A lot of
socializing.
Yeah. And to be honest with you, some of those morning meetings have been the best fellowship I've had with a group of guys in a long time. They turn into prayer meetings and discussions. I mean, really getting to know each other and about each other's life, and never felt in any way demeaned or made feel insecure or silly about bringing anything to the table with you. And again, I just want to say thank you.
Well, I appreciate you guys, because what we really had there, they were there at production meetings, and we tried to meet every day and talk over the program, content of the program, guests, sound bites, and all that kind of stuff. But we'd always protect some time to see how each other was doing and to pray for each other, and we'd take turns praying for each other. And it's like that was like my men's fellowship group. I really didn't need something outside that, because that served that purpose for me. The support I got from you guys and the fellowship we were able to enjoy together.
Exactly. And you know what? I think a lot of the people on the left would think those morning meetings are the times we hash through our talking points that we get from Fox News or Donald Trump
or we go to work whipping up all that hatred we have for people on the left.
Yeah, and actually it's based around God and Scripture, and it's the best way to start the day.
You know, it wasn't but a year or so after you came here, you sat with me and we prayed over my son, and God saved him that night, and from death, and it was dramatic, and it was definitely God heard prayer. That I think he's still with us, and his life definitely took a turn for the better.
Yeah, you'll never forget that.
I'll never forget that. No, that was a very you prayed in a way that I hadn't thought of praying, and that made a difference in my life and my entire family's life, especially my son's.
Yeah. Well, that's good to hear, and that's just a God thing, God doing his thing in response to simple faith. So, all right, well, listen, thank you guys, and let's give our listeners another treat. By the way, I was noticing when I was looking up some of these sound bites, you know, there was a page which contained the details of Ed Schultz's death at 64, which is a sad occasion. But the first note from somebody, very sad day for progressives. Meanwhile, Pat Robertson, Brian Fisher, and Glenn Beck are still alive somehow. Wow. So that was the first comment.
Wow. The hatred.
Yeah.
And this, wow.
Now, another person from whom I got a lot of love over the years was Rachel Maddow.
Oh, yeah.
And she was talking on this program. This is the last one of these little flashback memories we'll give you here, and then we'll get into what we need to talk about. But she was talking about Ann Coulter and me, the two of us together, in this segment. And here is how it went with Rachel Maddow.
Ann Coulter was revealed not as a political player or even as a pundit, but essentially as a comedian. She's a conservative comedian. That's what all of her books and all of her appearances are now. Right? Okay, that's a form of performance art. I think the same thing about Brian Fisher.
Grizzly bears do not observe boundaries. You can't put a no trespassing sign up in front of a grizzly bear and expect him to read it and understand it and obey it. They're going to go where people are, because people are food.
It's one thing for Brian Fisher to be talking about the homosexual agenda. It's another thing for him to be talking about, wanting to put up the 10 Commandments somewhere. One of those things. But Brian Fisher is talking about grizzly bears.
That's why you got to shoot them.
You don't have to shoot them.
Yes, you do, or they're going to eat you.
Okay, then
if it's Larry, if it's a choice between me and the grizzly bear is going down.
Brian Fisher thinks that grizzly bears are a grave satanic threat to America, and we must wipe them out. We've got to go kill those bears, because those bears are, I don't know if they're actually from hell, or if it's just that they kill Americans, and so bears have to be stopped. But that's comedy. That's not politics, and that's definitely not religion. And so I sort of think that Brian Fisher might be revealed one day as a hilarious, gay drag poet.
All right. According to Rachel Maddow, I am artfully concealing from you that in reality I am a hilarious, well, that part I'm not concealing from you, but I am a gay drag poet. Don't need to worry. 0 for 3, not gay. I don't go around in drag, and I am definitely not a poet.
Oh, I thought you were going to say hilarious.
No, I said I haven't been concealing that from people.
Okay, not a poet.
But I'm not a poet.
Yeah.
So, all right. Okay, enough of that stuff. Let's get into some content.
And you don't hate bears. You just don't want a bear eating you.
I just don't want him eating me. That was a caller that we had to the program. And I was talking about, you run into a bear, you got to shoot that man-eater on sight.
Yeah.
I was talking about Lewis and Clark. They ran into the grizzly bears. They heard from the Indians as they went west about these grizzly bears. And they said, no, we got guns. We've met bears before. They'd never met a grizzly. And one of them wrote in the journals at one point after about a half a dozen encounters, he said, our curiosity with respect to the grizzly bear is quite satisfied.
I'll never forget that caller, though, that we had. That thing really took on a life of its own, didn't it? It's still good.
It is about a 3 or 4. And I think what started that thing off was, wasn't it something where there was like somebody had a bear crossing or a deer crossing and he wanted it moved? I think that's where the conversation started. I don't know. There was a guy that went to, he was a city slicker, moved to some rural community, saw the deer crossing sign, and he went to the city council and wanted them to move the deer crossing sign because it was in a really inconvenient place.
So they wouldn't cross there?
Yeah, so they wouldn't, so they'd cross up here instead of down here. Grizzlies aren't going to obey those signs either. All right.
Oh.
Well, enough of that, whatever it has been.
Memory lane.
Memory lane.
Yeah.
Now, you probably saw this. I just came across this right after my program yesterday. But, we've talked about how Facebook censors speech, conservative speech in particular. They block conservative speech. They blocked a couple of patriotic songs that were created, especially for the 4th of July. Just blocked them completely, or blocked advertising for them when people went to give them a Facebook boost where you can pay money to boost it so more people see it. Facebook wouldn't let them do it. Doesn't match our standards of content, too political or whatever. Well, this newspaper in Texas, it's called The Vindicator, and it's in the city of Liberty, Texas. And what they decided to do from June 24 to July 4, they were going to run a little piece of the Declaration of Independence every day, so people could kind of digest the Declaration in bite-sized chunks. This was every day from June 24 to July 4. Well, the first 9 parts were posted as scheduled, no problem, but then came part 10, which consisted of paragraphs 27 through 31 of the Declaration, and Facebook flagged it. And they said to the Vindicator, this is an automated thing talking about their algorithms that they use to spot unacceptable speech. They informed the Vindicator that this, quote, goes against our standards of hate speech. And it was paragraphs 27 to 31 of the Declaration of Independence. That's what they had flagged as hate speech. Now, this is what that section of the Declaration of Independence says. Here's just some excerpts from it. Remember, the founders went through a long list. There's 27 different specific complaints that they had about the crown, about King George III and his offenses against the colonies, against the early Americans. And here's what some parts of this offensive section say when they're listing their complaints against King George. He has plundered our seas, ravaged our coasts, burnt our towns, and destroyed the lives of our people. He is at this time transporting large armies of foreign mercenaries to complete the works of death, desolation, and tyranny already begun, with circumstances of cruelty and perfidy scarcely paralleled in the most barbarous ages. He has excited domestic insurrections amongst us, and here's the part that got it flagged, he has endeavored to bring on the inhabitants of our frontiers the merciless Indian savages whose known rule of warfare is an undistinguished destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions. Now remember, we're talking about the Indian nations then. This is not a commentary on the Indian nations, the tribal nations of today. So let's make that very clear. But that's one of their complaints against King George. The Indian nations at that time had a known rule of war for everybody. They would just kill anybody indiscriminately, man, woman, child. And King George was trying to stir up these merciless Indian savages against our forefathers, and that was one of their complaints against King George. We'll be right back with more content. Stay with us, Focal Point, American Family Radio. Be right back.
Exposing Washington reveals the deception that plagues our nation's capital.
The mainstream media refuses to tell the truth of what's really happening.
Exposing Washington brings clarity to the news coming out of Washington, D.C.
The American people must stay informed on what our government is doing.
Exposing Washington with Walker Wildmon brings you the inside scoop of what's happening in our nation's capital.
We must take our country back.
Each Saturday at 2:30 p.m. Central on American Family Radio.
Hi, this is David Barton of Wall Builders Live, inviting you to join me here on American Family Radio this weekend. We take the ideas of the Founding Fathers and apply those ideas to the major issues of the day. Our guests include those who are in the headlines as well as experts on issues facing this great nation. Along the way, you'll discover the role that faith has played in our nation's history as well as in dealing with the issues we face right now. Join us Saturday afternoon at 2 Central here on American Family Radio.
Hey, I'm Francesca Battistelli. I've seen how destructive drug and alcohol abuse can be, but I also know there is a way out.
I was a big blackout drinker. I passed out outside a bar. I don't even remember being at that bar. And the ambulance was called, and I went to the hospital, and they kept me there till I sobered up. My friend came and got me, and then we went back to his house and just drank more. And I knew that I needed help. When I came to Adult and Teen Challenge, I knew hands down 100% that God put me here to get sober, and I had no reason to be sober without God. God has given me actual real plans and purpose in life.
If you or your loved one is struggling with an addiction, don't give up. Teen Challenge has helped thousands of teens and adults across the country end their addictions through the power of Jesus Christ. You can call them toll-free at 1-855-END-ADDICTION or visit teenchallengeusa.com. You're listening to American Family Radio.
American Family Radio. You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. Brian Fisher.
So there you have it. Declaration of Independence banned by Facebook as hate speech. So there you have it. And they did, to their credit, once they found out what their algorithms had done, they apologized. A kind of a lame apology. It looks like we made a mistake. Do you think? So anyway, that got cleared up with the apology. You know, in the Vindicator, this newspaper, small-town newspaper in Liberty, Texas, they got bombarded with emailed complaints from everywhere in the world because they wanted to read the rest of the declaration and the story that went along with it, but they couldn't even get to the website because with Europeans' crackdown on hate speech, when this thing got flagged by Facebook, it cut off access to their website from European countries, so nobody in Europe could gain access to their website. You know, we have been talking some about Kamala Harris. I do believe she's going to be the Democratic nominee for president in 2020. She's black. She's a woman. She's attractive. She has experience in politics. So I think she's got the edge. A lot of people talking about Elizabeth Warren as a possibility. In fact, speaking of Elizabeth Warren, here's a little excerpt from Donald Trump's rally last night in, I think it was in Great Falls, Montana, or Bozeman, Montana. Anyway, he was doing a rally in Montana, which is a hop, skip, and a jump from the state of Idaho, my home state, and he just lit up the folks. I mean, he has the capacity to just get people lit up, and they have fun. Everybody's happy. Everybody's up. Everybody's cheering. Everybody's clapping. Everybody's having a great time. And in the process, Donald Trump took on Elizabeth Warren, who may very well be his opponent in 2020. They may wind up in a debate, and he made an offer during last night's rally.
I shouldn't tell you because I like not to give away secrets, but this one. Let's say I'm debating Pocahontas, right? I promise you I'll do this. I will take, you know those little kits they sell on television for $2? Learn your heritage. Guy says, I was born in Scotland. It turns out he was born in Puerto Rico, and that's okay. It's good. You know. Guy says, I was born in Germany. Well, he wasn't born in Germany. He was born someplace else. I'm going to get one of those little kits. And in the middle of the debate, when she proclaims that she's of Indian heritage, because her mother said she has high cheekbones. That's her only evidence, that her mother said she had high cheekbones. We will take that little kit and say, but we have to do it gently. Because we're in the Me Too generation, so we have to be very gentle. And we will very gently take that kit and we will slowly toss it, hoping it doesn't hit her and injure her arm, even though it only weighs probably 2 ounces. And we will say, I will give you $1 million to your favorite charity, paid for by Trump, if you take the test and it shows you're an Indian, you know.
All right, so there's Donald Trump making a good faith offer to his possible opponent, Elizabeth Warren. You know, the only family connection, I mentioned this before, but it bears repeating, the only family connection that Elizabeth Warren has to any Indians anywhere is that one of her ancestors actually rounded up Indians for the Trail of Tears march.
Wow.
So that's her only connection to the Indian nations on the frontier. Now, Kamala Harris, I started talking about her, and then we got sidetracked with Pocahontas. But one of the things that Kamala Harris said yesterday is she reminded people that 8 immigrants signed the Declaration of Independence. And it turns out that she was right. But Ben Shapiro gave us the rest of the story. There were 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence. 48 of them were born in the American colonies. 2 of them were born in England, 2 of them in Ireland, 2 of them in Scotland, 1 of them in Wales, and 1 in Northern Ireland. In other words, they were all immigrants from the United Kingdom. So Kamala Harris creating a little bit of deception by the way she dangled that out there. By the way, we got an email from the last caller that we had on the program yesterday, and I felt terrible. I only had 25 seconds left, and I actually gave her about 30 because it was clear she had a lot she wanted to impart, but we just ran out of time. It was a hard break at the end of the program. But she sent us a very nice email and letting us know that she was the last caller on yesterday's program. And she was calling to talk about the candidate for governor in Michigan that we interviewed yesterday. His name is Patrick Colbeck. He's a state senator in Michigan. He's actually a rocket scientist. He helped design basically the International Space Station. But she wanted us to know that she says, I know 3 of the 4 Republican candidates for governor, and I have met the 4th, that would be Colbeck, several times. I am backing Colbeck for many reasons, but he is the only, all in caps, the only Republican senator that was willing to go to a Democrat debate a few months ago, and he took on Abdul El-Sayed, who is a Muslim pro-Sharia candidate for governor. And he's probably the favorite on the Democratic side. So the possible candidate for governor representing the Democratic Party will be a Muslim candidate who believes in Sharia law and wants to promote and wants to advance Sharia law. He even has connections to the Muslim Brotherhood, and Patrick Colbeck was the only Republican that was willing to take him on in the field. Patrick Colbeck pointed out his ties to the Muslim Brotherhood. And then, of course, Abdul turned around and said, I'm being attacked for my faith. No, we're just exposing your affiliation with the Brotherhood and your support for Sharia law. Now, Senator Colbeck told him later on the air that he loves all Muslims. It is Sharia that he's against. I'm for Muslims, but against Sharia law. That's exactly my position. And Abdul said that while he may love all Muslims hated him. Actually used that word apparently on air. All Muslims hate you because you are against Sharia law. That's going to be a huge issue in Michigan. So there's at least one candidate in the Republican field that's willing to take on this pro-Sharia Muslim candidate. She says this: we need a fighter on the Republican side that will not cave. We are in desperate need for a man of conviction and courage, a man of honor, another Matt Bevin type. That's the governor in Kentucky who's turning that place upside down in a good way. She said this: unlike the other candidates, Senator Colbeck does not have the funds to take on the establishment because he is not supported by special interests. In other words, the swamp isn't behind him. He's not getting a lot of money from the swamp. You know, we also talked about Scott Pruitt. I was really sorry to see him basically be forced to resign. It was just an absolute crusade. I mean, a militaristic crusade against Scott Pruitt on the part of the Talking Snake media. They manufactured false accusations against him. They reported every false rumor against him. They blew it up. They magnified it. And they finally just created such unrelenting misery for him and for his family that he finally said, look, I've just had it. I for the sake of my family, I'm just going to have to step down from this role. And it's very, very unfortunate. You know, Mark Morano over at Climate Depot, one of the websites I frequent numerous times every week, he said that Scott Pruitt was the best director of the EPA we've ever had. We've had the EPA since 1972, Richard Nixon's idea, started by a Republican, don't you know, but he's the best EPA director we've ever had. Now, here are the 5 best things that Scott Pruitt did before he got run out of the EPA. Number 1, he convinced Donald Trump to ditch the Paris Climate Agreement. So we got out of the Paris Climate Agreement. That was a ridiculous agreement. Obama signed it in 2015. We would have committed us to reducing greenhouse emissions, gas emissions, by 26 to 28% below 2005 levels by 2025. Which would be absurd because it wouldn't do any good, because CO2 does not cause perceptible global warming, and it is plant food. Second thing he did is he rolled back Obama's Clean Power Plan. That was a plan that Obama adopted that would have limited the amount of greenhouse gases that coal plants can emit. Part of his war on coal would have pretty much shut down most of the coal plants in America. That's one of the inexpensive sources of electricity, heat for the American people. Third thing he did is he bagged Obama's Waters of the United States rule. This is a rule that Obama enacted in 2015 that basically gave the federal government authority over every single little puddle of water in America. This is a vast extension of government overreach. I personally know people that have been sent to prison because of the overextension of this environmental protection for the waters of the United States. He dramatically reduced Obama's fuel emission standards. Obama wanted to mandate that the average fuel economy of every vehicle in America would be 54.5 miles a gallon, twice what it is today. That's virtually impossible standard to reach. And lastly, he turned the EPA into an agency dedicated to protecting public health rather than reducing global warming. His effect definitely going to be missed. I hope the next guy is going to be as tough on regulations as he was. That's it for the first hour. We'll be back with the second hour on Focal Point on American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name. Program Focal Point, Network American Family Radio. Stick with us. We'll be back right after the news.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio.
As millennials, we have more than $1 trillion in purchasing power, so you know businesses are watching us. But millennials are losing our faith, so we know Satan is watching us. Engage magazine is for millennials by millennials, and it speaks to faith, purpose, and a closer walk with Jesus. Because above all, God is watching us. Visit engagemagazine.net and listen Saturday afternoons at 5:30 Central on AFR.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio, a ministry of the American Family Association.
American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh. Vice President Mike Pence spoke today at the Washington, D.C. headquarters of U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and he affirmed the Trump administration's support for the agency.
The President sent me here today with a very simple message. While I stand before you today at a time when some people are actually calling for the abolition of ICE, in this White House, let me be clear, we are with you 100%. And as the President said last night, we will always stand proudly with the brave heroes of ICE and our Border Patrol.
Some Democratic lawmakers have called for the abolition of ICE. The Vice President's appearance comes amid concerns about migrant children separated from their parents at the nation's southern border. During his weekly address, President Trump spoke about his search for a new Supreme Court justice to replace Justice Anthony Kennedy, who announced his retirement last week. The president noted that this new nominee would mark his second appointment to the High Court.
Last year, I was proud to appoint Justice Kennedy's former law clerk, Neil Gorsuch, to the Supreme Court. Over the last year, Justice Gorsuch has embodied the most sacred principles of the court, making impartial decisions based upon the Constitution.
The president is expected to announce his nominee Monday night. A national defense analyst says the election of a far-left socialist could have grave consequences for the United States. Chad Groening has more.
Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador is known as AMLO. On December 1st, he takes office as Mexico's next president. Frank Gaffney served as the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for International Security during the Reagan administration, and now runs the Center for Security Policy in Washington, D.C. He believes that Obrador is a serious problem for Mexico and the United States.
There's a lot of wishful thinking going on at the moment, I'm afraid, that he'll be something other than what he has been all of his life, which is a pretty radical leftist.
And Gaffney says Obrador could encourage and even assist migrants, including non-Mexicans, to enter the United States illegally.
This is a formula for possibly a hot war with Mexico, something we haven't seen since the 1840s. But I'll tell you what, if he is intent on radicalizing his nation, much as Hugo Chavez did in Venezuela, we could well face a situation that makes the present problems with drug trafficking and gang wars and so on in Mexico pale into insignificance.
And Gaffney says if the United States is forced to take such drastic action, it will be a bloody mess. I'm Chad Groening.
A bill in California aims to help foster children, but a doctor says it actually does the opposite.
Assembly Bill 2119, otherwise known as the Transgender Foster Care Bill, says that any foster child expressing any degree of gender identity confusion should be strongly encouraged to pursue any and all treatments to affirm their chosen gender. Dr. Andre Van Mol, a California family physician and co-chair of the Committee on Adolescent Sexuality for the American College of Pediatricians, is concerned about the measure.
By this bill, the state of California is basically insisting, but strongly encouraging, that any foster child with gender identity confusion basically must be encouraged down a treatment pathway that is not proven safe, it is not proven effective, and this is all being done for a condition that overwhelmingly goes away on its own by adulthood. Children with gender dysphoria in the medical literature have what's called a desistance rate, a rate of the condition going away on its own, of basically 80 to 95%.
Dr. Van Mol encourages Californians concerned about this measure to contact their state senators and tell them to vote no.
It is not in the best interest of foster children in the case of 2119. It's actually a harm to them.
I'm Chris Woodward.
American Family News is available online at onenewsnow.com, on Facebook and Twitter, and download the One News Now mobile app. I'm Rusty Pugh.
The problem in our day is very similar to the problem in Elijah's day, if I might make that statement. It's not so much that we have rejected God, but that so many of us have made him such a small part of our lives. He's our Sunday God.
Join Dr. David Jeremiah for his series, Someone Like You, next time on Turning Point.
5:30 a.m. and 7 p.m. Central on American Family Radio.
Brian Fisher of the American Family Association.
Brian Fisher.
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 I agree with Brian Fisher of the American Family Association, who blogged Where Angels Fear to Tweet.
Brian Fisher, the right-winger, thinks he's starring in his own episode of Mad Men.
It's one thing for Brian Fisher to be talking about the homosexual agenda. It's another thing for him to be talking about, wanting to put up the 10 Commandments somewhere. One of those things. But Brian Fisher is talking about grizzly bears.
That's why you got to shoot them.
That's comedy. That's not politics, and that's definitely not religion.
Brian Fisher doesn't know how to run for office. He's just running his mouth. Fisher couldn't be prouder of his backward behavior.
I sort of think that Brian Fisher might be revealed one day as a hilarious, gay drag poet.
Freedom prospers when religion is vibrant and the rule of law under God is acknowledged. An informed patriot is what we want.
Welcome to American Family Radio's Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio.
Muscular Christianity.
Where we relentlessly explore the intersection of truth and politics.
The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
Now, here's your host, Brian Fisher.
And welcome back to the second hour of this 9th anniversary edition of Focal Point on American Family Radio. Special guest in our Focal Point studio is the president of American Family Association, Tim Wildmon, who just got freaked out to hear one of his hosts described as a hilarious gay drag poet. So I apologize, Tim, for exposing you to that, and repent to dust and ashes.
I'm around you every day, Brian. I got to tell you, I hadn't seen that. I just totally, my wife says sometimes I'm not paying attention. Maybe this is one of those times.
One of those moments. So.
Yeah, I don't know.
Anyway, Tim, I appreciate you just dropping by. This is 9 years ago today that we started the program, and just thank you for dropping by to help us celebrate. And
absolutely. Well, I just wanted to come mainly on behalf of Right Wing Watch and say thank you, because it's your show that allows them to employ 3 Americans and keep the business going.
Yeah. Well, so, we care about people on the left. That's living proof right
yes,
there.
That's the. Just want to congratulate you and Jeff and Rob and the team here for 9 years of. I guess Rush Limbaugh would say broadcast excellence. I think you guys are doing an excellent job of bringing the truth, and we get a lot of comments on the show, and so I just wanted to say keep on keeping on, and proud to have you, Brian, as part of American Family Radio's daily lineup.
Well, and I want to thank you, Tim. Your father was the one that extended the initial invitation to me to become a part of the American Family Radio team, and then he had his health issues almost right away. I think I was in place about 6 weeks, and so the baton was handed over to you. So I really, essentially, at the very beginning of my broadcast career was under your leadership, and this is the favorite job I've ever had in my life. So I just want to thank you for the opportunity to serve here. Appreciate your leadership over the organization. One of the things I've said when we have these donor receptions that we speak at is that you look around, you see some pro-family organizations, and when they go from the founding generation to the second generation, it seems like somebody drops the baton in there somewhere, and an organizations that carried the pro-family torch proudly and high. For some reason, when the torch just doesn't get past to the second generation, they kind of drop the ball and just kind of disappear. And that's one of the things I've always appreciated about American Family Association. You have the same exact passion, the same values that your father does, and those have been woven into the ongoing ministry of AFA under your leadership. And I don't know what God's going to do in the future, but I look at your sons, at Wesley and Walker, 2 sons to be proud of, and they've got the same passion, same conviction that you have. So at least while they're here in the AFA network, they will be providing the same energy that started this thing under your father.
Yeah. Well, that's the prayer and that's the hope, and I do think you're right. Wesley and Walker are on the right track, and they're soaking it all in. They're learning from their elders, such as you and me, and so that bodes well for the future of the ministry. And but I just basically wanted to say to you guys, especially you, Brian, you know, I see you. You get up. I don't know what time you get up in the morning, but I know when you get to here at work at 8, from 8 until 1. Maybe you snack on a few almonds or a pimento cheese sandwich. I don't know, but most of your time is spent. Most all your time is spent getting ready for this show, and talking to Rob, talking to Jeff. I walk by sometimes. You guys are in there praying over the program. You're praying for our listeners. So this is a show committed to Almighty God and to His truth, and to proclaiming what the Word says about the issues of our time. And so I just wanted your listeners to know how much thought went into every single show, how much planning went into every show, and people can tell that. You know, Brian doesn't come in here and wing it.
Right.
Brian comes in here prepared with what he's going to say, and that's what people love about listening to Brian, because they can then learn how to defend their position because Brian teaches that each and every day. So anyway, that's all I wanted to say, you guys. I appreciate you letting me interject on the show.
All right, Tim.
All right.
Well, thank you for
I'm
dropping
leaving
by.
now.
Okay, and
don't blow it now. I mean, I've like set it up really good for you. For next
so the
hour.
question
Yeah.
is, I've been out of golf for well over a year now because of my battle with cancer. You just survived a dangerous automobile accident, broke your right wrist.
Yeah.
How long before you're going to be back in the golf saddle?
I was in the golf saddle 2-3 days ago.
You actually swung a club?
I had to talk my wife into letting me do that. But see, that's that you got to weigh. If you go golf, then she's going to say you can lay pine straw. You know? So I can't like go. I don't feel well enough to lay pine straw, but I feel well enough to golf.
Yeah.
So it's a balancing act that you gotta. But I am playing a little bit now and having fun. Look forward to getting you back out there.
Yep, hoping to. As soon as my legs get a little bit stronger, I'll be back out there. All right, Tim, thank you very much for dropping by. You know, one of the other issues that we have followed here are the accusations against Jim Jordan. He was a wrestling coach at Ohio State. He was a wrestler there and then became a wrestling coach at Ohio State. And he's been accused by a couple of former wrestlers of having guilty knowledge of sexual abuse by the team doctor, the team physician, and wrestlers on the team. And they're claiming that Jim Jordan knew about it and he didn't do anything with it, didn't say anything about it. Jim Jordan is insisting, no, he didn't know anything about it. And evidently the abuse, and it very likely may have happened or may have happened. I have no reason to believe that it didn't. It very well could have happened. But he was the team doctor, so he's performing the kind of examinations on athletes as a physician that would give him opportunity to take advantage without anybody else finding out about it, without anybody else seeing it, without anybody else knowing about it. Jim Jordan insisting he knew nothing about it, and I do believe Jim Jordan's word on this. And part of the problem, you know, one of the things you always want to look at is the character of the people that are making accusations. You know, one of the things that Luke was very intent on doing when he wrote Luke and Acts is to describe the character of the people that were early witnesses to the early days of Christianity, how they were devout and how they were righteous and how they were blameless according to the law. Well, the accusers of Jim Jordan do not have clean hands. They have a history, the two of them have a history of failed business dealings, lawsuits, harassment allegations, and in the case of one accuser, an 18-month prison sentence for fraud. One of the wrestlers, his name is Mike DiSabato, he approached a widow of a Marine who was killed in combat, said, I'd like to start a charity in honor of your husband, and we'll use it to help injured vets. And she said that would be great. So he started this charity, but he siphoned all the funds off into some business that he was starting to start a mixed martial arts venture that he'd founded. And finally, the widow had to get a cease and desist order. And there are other violations of the same nature, not guys whose word has any credibility. I'm sticking with Jim Jordan on this one. We'll be right back with Dan Gainor. Stay with us. Focal Point, American Family Radio.
Here's Twyla Brace, president of CCHF, with today's Health Freedom Minute.
In just 5 days, you can buy Big Brother in the Exam Room, The Dangerous Truth About Electronic Health Records. I've never written a book before, and given the extensive editing process, I may never write another. But those who read it in its final stages have described the book as very well researched, scary, and provocative. One person said what's happening is outlandish. An early reader told me she's always been rather dismissive of footnotes, but said the footnotes in this book are a powerful show of force. They are meant to be. You won't have to take my word for what you learn. If you want personal notification of its release, contact us at BigBrotherInTheExamRoom.com. BigBrotherInTheExamRoom.com.
Learn more about protecting your healthcare choices. Sign up for the CCHF Weekly E-News Update at cchfreedom.org. That's cchfreedom.org.
Hello, everyone. I'm Tim Wildmon, president of American Family Association and American Family Radio. You know, we only go to the Holy Land once a year, and that's in March. Last year, we filled up several months in advance. So if you want to go in March of 2019, it's time to look at the details. You can get a brochure from us at 800-FAMILIES, 1-800-FAMILIES, option 5, and leave us your name and your telephone number, or go to twholyland.com, twholyland.com. It's going to be a wonderful time in Israel. We'll go to the Sea of Galilee, the Jordan River, the Holy City of Jerusalem, Bethlehem, Masada, the Dead Sea, and on the list goes. If you'd like to go with us in March of 2019, all the information is available at twholyland.com. Order a brochure by calling 800-FAMILIES, option 5.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio.
Howdy, and welcome back to the second hour of Focal Point on American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name. The program is Focal Point, the network American Family Radio, and this is, as we have mentioned, our 9th anniversary edition. Focal Point went live 9 years ago today. And somebody who has been a regular guest on this program is my next guest on our decision maker line, Dan Gainor. He's the Vice President for Business and Culture at the Media Research Center. They do exactly what their name implies. They research the media. They track the media for us. They watch the Talking Snake media, listen to the Talking Snake media, read the Talking Snake media so we don't have to, and digest it for us and let us know what we need to be aware of out there. So, Dan, welcome back to Focal Point with Brian Fisher.
Well, Brian, thank you, and congratulations. I don't think people realize in this day and age how important an anniversary like that can be, because we both have a lot of people who are out to get us a lot, and you particularly have been a target, so that you have endured the slings and arrows of outrageous idiots for 9 years. It's just a great tribute to you. Congrats.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that, and I want to express again, I've done this before, but want to express again my gratitude to you and the folks there at MRC. You stood by me at a time when I was virtually standing alone, and you had my back, and I will never, ever forget that act of kindness and support. So thank you for standing by me in a really tough time. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you. And I mean, there's darn few of us on the right side when it comes to certain issues. And we have to stand by one another because, what did Ben Franklin say? Either hang together or hang separately.
Yep, hang together or hang separately. All right, well, I appreciate it. Good to be on the same team with you, Dan. Very much appreciate that. Well, let's talk a little bit about things we might want to be aware of that are taking place in the media. One of them is how celebrities celebrate Independence Day. We just came through the 4th, and I know you guys have followed a little bit of that. So what do we need to know about celebrities and the way they celebrate the 4th of July?
They don't exactly celebrate America anymore. You've got just the idea. There's one of the people over broadly said it well. America has always been bad. Oh God, come on. I don't like to brag on this point, but because I had nothing to do with it. But I have an uncle I'll never know because he died fighting Nazis to free Europe. No, America has not always been bad. This is just, patent idiocy. But this is the kind of stuff you see. And one of the key things to note, because there's a study that came out this week that CNN was, very, very excited about, that not all the people are proud to be American, that only 47% of Americans are proud, extremely proud to be American. And, of course, a lot of it has to do with Donald Trump. No, a lot of it has to do with the left. This is not news. The left doesn't like America. The left looks back and says it wants everything that we've ever done to somehow have been perfect. And human beings are not perfect. We created a country in a situation where, fewer nations have ever managed to do it. I mean, just the idea that we could rebel against a king when we had 2 million people, many of whom were not even supporting the revolution, rebelling against an empire of 10 million. I met a British reenactor recently at Mount Vernon, and he was asking why he dressed up as a British soldier. He said, if you look at it, every one of the people every one of the nations that fought America, on the side of America, Spain and Holland, and certainly France, Britain eventually defeated. The only one that was defeated by Britain was us. And the left hates that.
And it's interesting, too, that you look at that poll data that CNN cited, that only 47% of Americans are extremely proud of their country. Well, the Democrat level was at 32%. The Republican level was at 74%. So 74% of Republicans are extremely proud of their country. Only 32% of Democrats are. That's a striking gap in their view of America, talking about the same country, looking at the same set of facts, the same history as you and I do. So how would you explain, Dan, why is there such a huge gap between the way Democrats look at America and the way Republicans look at America?
Well, part of it is this drummed-up media supported and inspired resistance movement. We saw, in the last couple of days, somebody protest at the Statue of Liberty, effectively shutting down the Statue of Liberty for 4 hours, so people traveled maybe from around the world might end up not being able to see it because this person decided they're going to protest. We saw a teenager assaulted in a restaurant because he was wearing a Make America Great hat. The left has gone insane in ways that we see now every day, where they want to ban opponents from speaking, where they attack people in the street. And so it's not surprising that this impacts them. But when you look at that number, it's not just a gap of more than 40%. That means more than twice as many Republicans are extremely proud of their nation. And it's because the left listens to too much of its own propaganda. And, oh my gosh, this awful thing happened. There are 330 or 340 million people in this country. You can find awful if you look for it. You can also find a lot of good. But if you, again, go back looking at statistics, you'll find those same liberals don't go to church much, don't aren't helping people the same way that conservatives are helping people. And so it's no wonder that they're unhappy all the time.
Well, let me ask you this question, Dan. I think a lot of the Democrat unhappiness is centered on Donald Trump. They seem to have this visceral and, like you said, almost an unhinged hatred for him. I mean, it's just a visceral kind of coming from a really deep place, I think, of just raw hatred and anger inside their souls. I'd hate to be inside one of their souls and be in the pit of whatever is generating that hatred. But it seems to be focused on Donald Trump. And the media, we've seen some of the studies that you have done there at MRC, 90 to 91% of all the media coverage of Donald Trump has been negative, constantly running him down by the major media outlets, what I call the talking snake media. And yet, Dan, despite all of that, his approval number still hanging in there, around 45%. His approval numbers right now are higher than Barack Obama's were at the same stage in his presidency. And so I guess looking at it as a conservative, to me, that's actually a pretty encouraging sign, because it's an indication that the American people are seeing through some of the slander and the distortions and the bilge of the mainstream media. If their message was sinking in, if people were believing them, then his disapproval numbers would be up around 90%, but they're not.
Yeah, I think for the left, their response is essentially a national temper tantrum. They were told by the media, they were told by their leaders that they were going to win in 2016, and it was going to be the beginning of the end for the right. That demographic change had occurred in this country and that they would never lose again. And then when they lost, I think they have become unable to deal with it. There must be a villain, whether it's Russia or Trump or some bizarre combination of scenarios and scandals and cabals. So they want to blame somebody. They're angry at the world because they lost, and they can't come to grips with it. And on the right, I think the more that they act this way, the more that they throw drinks in the faces of 16-year-olds and steal their hats, the more that they commit thuggery in the streets and harass people online, I think the more that the right says, well, we have to fight this. Mm-hmm. I don't know if we'll ever know exactly what was in the mind of Justice Anthony Kennedy about retiring right now, but it is quite possible. I've seen some people theorize this, that he feels that the left's view, particularly about being against the First Amendment, against free speech, against religious freedom and all, needs to be checked. And the only way to check that is for Trump to name another justice who's in office for a long time.
Well, and you think about it, and one comment, I want to talk about one other thing before we're done here, Dan, but you look at how unhinged the left has become. And the incident you mentioned took place in the restaurant. There's video, grabs the guy's hats, throws a Coke in his face, and then walks out of the restaurant. Well, that's technically as assault. We might think, well, that's not that big a deal. But when you violate somebody's physical space and there's physical contact, that counts as assault. So that's a crime. And so the guy's been arrested who did this, and he's going to be charged with that. But, it seems like the gap between words that are assaultive and actions that are physically assaultive is getting narrower and narrower. And it seems to me we are not that far away. I mean, we saw it with Steve Scalise last year. We are not that far away from seeing more and more instances. The left is so unhinged, more and more instances of the out-of-control left taking their anger and their rage out in physical ways on people that are conservatives. What do you think about that?
Well, I fear that you are right. I hope that that's not the case. I hope that as we get closer to, because we're rolling downhill, and the media are pushing us downhill, pushing us toward, and I think they hope that they're building momentum. I fear they're pushing us toward a cliff. And it's my hope, no matter which side you're on, left or right, that the cooler heads will prevail, that we will say, no, as a nation, we don't want to go over the cliff. We went over a cliff once before, We had good reason to do so, but it still was devastating, and 750,000 people died. I think that if we can't talk about things, though, instead of yelling always at one another and protesting in the streets and shutting down things and assaulting people, then if we can't talk, then actions will happen, and that's my fear.
Our guest has been Dan Gainor, Vice President for Business and Culture at the Media Research Center, one of our good friends. They do great work. The website is newsbusters.org. I'm on that website every day doing show prep. Couldn't do adequate show prep without him. Dan, as always, thanks for being with us, and have a terrific weekend, my friend.
Thanks. You do the same. God bless.
We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Len Ingram of Redeem Clean felt God call him to support the American Family Association.
I'm a laundryman. I'm the son of a laundryman, too. I love clean clothes. I love the business. I love everything about it. This project was built exclusively to support AFA and AFR. There's no strings attached. Another thing that I would like to see come out of this is that I would like to see other business people feel a calling to support ministries wherever and whatever they do to share the gospel of Jesus Christ.
In addition to your regular AFA giving, Redeem Clean Laundry Detergent allows you to increase your support of AFA just by continuing to wash your family's clothes. For clean laundry and support of a cleaner society, it's Redeem Clean. Learn more, find options, and get Redeem Clean products at afastore.net. That's afastore.net.
Are you a responsible person who finds yourself growing deeper and deeper in credit card debt and you're not sure how to fix the problem? Then get ready for a toll-free number that will put you on a path to financial recovery. Trinity Debt Management is a nonprofit organization that will consolidate your accounts into one easy-to-manage monthly payment, put a stop to late fees and over-limit charges, and reduce your interest rates by as much as 60%. You'll save thousands and become debt-free for keeps. It's not a loan. It's a smart way to relieve your stress, meet your obligations, and preserve your self-respect. If your debt has you down, we should talk. Gather up your bills and call this toll-free number for a free, no-obligation debt analysis. 1-800-788-1813. That's 1-800-788-1813. If you're in debt and you need help, call Trinity at 1-800-788-1813.
American Family Radio. You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. Video segments of today's program will be posted at afr.net and on the Focal Point Facebook page. You'll also find the best collection of Brian's resources on our Facebook page. If you're on Twitter, be among the very first every morning to find out what the day's show will be about. Just follow Brian at Brian J. Fisher.
Brian J. Fisher.
Howdy, and welcome back to Focal Point on American Family Radio, our 9th anniversary edition. Focal Point started 9 years ago today. Glad to have you in the conversation. I know some of you have been listening to us for a long time. In fact, Jeff said that we had a poster on the live stream on Facebook,
yes,
talking about the background to the interaction with that caller about the bears.
Yeah, we couldn't remember what was the original story that prompted that story and that caller, and somebody wrote in to remind us. He goes, the bear story was related to bear attacks against hikers who were told that they could not shoot a bear if they were attacked. That's from Laura.
Yeah. So that's supposed to roll into a ball or something like that and go still or something like that. Just whatever you do.
It was pretty ridiculous.
Don't shoot them.
Whatever
don't fight
it was.
back. Yeah. And they'll be nice to you if you are only nice to them. Number to call if you'd like to join us on this 9th anniversary program in our last half hour is 888-589-8840. 888-589-8840.
I remember one other story that kicked off a lot of pushback from the left. You may remember this about the killer whale.
Oh, yeah. We should have gotten some of that. So, yeah, in the backstory there, I was talking about this killer whale that had killed 3 people. And he killed the 3rd person in its, what was the name of that killer whale?
It was
Wasn't Shamu.
I could Google it. There's probably a ton of stories on it.
Oh yeah. In fact, I think that whale is still alive, if I'm not mistaken. They shut down SeaWorld, so they had to do something with the whale. But anyway, he had killed 3 people. That whale, I think it was a she, had killed 3 people in her career. 2 trainers and somebody taking care of the facility and all that kind of stuff. You know, and the Bible said about a goring bull, if you own a bull and it gores somebody the first time, you're not liable because you did not know that you owned a bull that was liable to gore somebody. So you're not accountable for that first strike. But if you own a bull that's gored once and it gores a second time and you didn't kill that ox after it gored the first time, then you are accountable for whatever happens in that second attack by the goring bull. And so I said quite simply, look, if we're following a biblical standard, that I think was in my first summer here. That might have been clear back in 2009, almost not long after we started.
It was March, around the beginning of March of 2010.
Okay, so that was less than a year after we started the program. Anyway, I said, if we follow a biblical standard, you extract a principle out of that. If you've got an animal that represents a lethal threat to people, you got to neutralize the animal. You got to euthanize the animal so he doesn't harm people, because people are far more valuable than animals. So that was my point, that we ought to put this whale out of its misery. And we had people on the left accusing me of, the command in the book of Moses was to stone the animal to death. So they thought I was talking about dragging that whale out on the side of the pool and stoning it to death.
That's crazy. Was the whale's name Tilikum?
Tilikum, yes. Whale's name was Tilikum. So anyway, that was, in fact, I think that was kind of the first time I kind of broke surface in kind of the broader media. I didn't even think a thing about it. I was just talking like I usually do.
And it wasn't the last.
It wasn't the last, that was for sure. So the number again is 888-589-8840, 888-589-8840. One more clip. This is clip 4. One more clip from last night's rally in Montana. Donald Trump talking about one of our favorite people here at Focal Point. Let's listen.
I said it the other day. Yes, she is a low IQ individual, Maxine Waters. I said it the other day. I mean, honestly, she's somewhere in the mid-60s. I believe that. He will be impeached. I will impeach him. Even the Democrats are saying, how are you saying that? They don't want to use that word because it gets the Republicans out to vote. They say, stay away from that word. Especially since he's done nothing wrong. That helps also, right? There's no collusion. No collusion. After spending $22 million, it's awfully tough. And the House just left and they said there's no collusion. Can you imagine this? It's all a ruse.
All a ruse. And he's correct about that. $22 million has been spent so far. So far, there is absolutely no evidence, not a scintilla of evidence, of any kind of collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia. Well, let's grab a call here on our 9th anniversary, 888-589-8840. Let's talk to Nancy in Tampa, Florida. Nancy, welcome. What's on your mind?
Well, they diagnosed me with pancreatic cancer, and I need your prayers to get through this. And congratulations on your anniversary.
Well, thank you, Nancy.
And, just keep me in your prayer.
Okay, well, we'll do that right now. We'll have our whole listening audience pray for you. I know pancreatic cancer, that's a mean one. That's a tough one. So you've got you've got a heavy burden in front of you, and we want to pray right now that God will help you shoulder that, and that if it by His grace you might experience a healing touch from Him. So let's pray together, listening audience, for Nancy right now. Father, we lift Nancy before your throne. We're told in the Scriptures that your throne is a throne of grace and mercy, where we can find grace to help in time of need. And Lord, she is in a time of great need as she deals with this very tough cancer. And Lord, you know all about what's going on in her body. You know everything about everything. Nothing's hidden from you. You know exactly what the problem is. And I pray, Lord, that you would consider releasing a healing touch, a dramatic and miraculous healing touch into Nancy's life. We defer, Lord, to your sovereign wisdom. We know that you may have plans that are other plans than we have, plans that fit into your purposes for Nancy's life, but our request before you, we don't want to fail to ask you, Lord, that you would touch her, that you would apply the healing power of the shed blood of Christ to every place in her body that needs a healing touch, that you would apply the healing salve of the Holy Spirit to every place in her body that needs a healing touch. We pray that you would rebuke every work of Satan who may have some part in this to try to end her life prematurely. We pray that he would be bound and forced to leave her presence and forbidden to return. So we pray that you would send ministering spirits from your throne with healing power to touch her and make her well. We pray these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. Okay, Nancy, God bless you, and we will keep you in our thoughts and prayers.
Thank you very much,
all right,
Brian. I actually couldn't find you for 2 weeks, and I just about went crazy there. Because for some reason you didn't come on my TV, and I missed you very much.
All right. Well, thank you, Nancy.
Thank God I got it again.
Okay, good. That's very kind of you. And what Nancy's talking about is we are on community television networks all across the country, probably 30, 40 places. We're on TV here in Tupelo on Channel 49. So there, Nancy's catching us on one of those community television stations. All right. Thank you, Nancy, and God bless you. Let's grab a call from Kate in Tyler, Texas. Number to call, by the way, 888-589-8840, 888-589-8840. Kate, what's on your mind? Talk to me.
Hi.
Hi.
Okay, so I have a friend who mentioned something about soul ties if you have fornication before marriage. And I was wondering if you knew anything about that and if it perhaps didn't just have to be fornication before marriage, or just anything on the subject, basically.
Yeah. All right, Kate. Well, I appreciate the call. And I do believe in the reality of soul ties, where our soul can be bound together with the soul of another human being, either for good or for negative purposes. And that's part of the caution in the Scriptures against fornication. We're to flee sexual immorality. God's will is that we abstain from sexual immorality. This is the will of God for you. And part of the reason is if you have sexual intimacy with another human being, your souls are joined together in some way by the act of sexual intimacy, and that joining together has been done in a way that is contrary to the will of God. You know, one of the things I counseled young couples when they were dating is the reason they needed to abstain from sexual immorality and find ways to protect themselves is that if they become sexually active while they're dating, their relationship will stop growing right there. That's as far as their relationship will grow. Wherever they got to that point, once they start having sexual intimacy, they're done growing in their relationship. Now, we need to realize that that's not the end of the story, that if we understand what's happened, we understand that we have culpability for this being bound together in an unhealthy way with someone through an act of sexual immorality. What we need to do is go before God, and we need to renounce. It needs to be done out loud because Satan cannot read our mind, so we've got to do it out loud, and we renounce out loud, verbally, the act of sexual immorality that bound me together with this other individual. It's outside the will of God. We renounce any connections that have been formed through that act of sexual immorality. We ask God to forgive us. We ask Him to come to break that soul tie, and we ask God to come and cleanse us and renew us and set us on a path of righteousness. All right, I hope that helps a little bit, Kate.
Yes, it did. Thank you.
Okay, you're very welcome. Thank you, Kate. Appreciate it. God bless you. Let's grab a call from Kelly in Desark, Arkansas. I don't know if I said that right, Kelly, but welcome.
Yeah, that sounded right. As a Christian conservative and a Democrat, I would like to see Kethridge on the Supreme Court, but I wanted to know who you predict and why you're making your prediction for Monday.
Okay, who would you like to be on the Supreme Court?
Kethledge, I believe.
Oh, Kethledge. Yeah, Kethledge. All right, appreciate that, Kelly. I'm going to let you go because we're coming up against a hard break. Appreciate the call, and I'll share my thoughts starting now, and if I need to carry over into the next, I'll be happy to do that. And I really don't know the answer to the question. My pick would be Amy Coney Barrett. I've got a soundbite, I think, in the roster somewhere talking about her being the most pro-life nominee of the 25. She's the most unapologetically pro-life candidate for the Supreme Court. She is strong in her Catholic faith, right where we want her to be strong on issues of life and marriage and sexual morality. And I believe she would make an outstanding contribution to the court. We'll be right back with a little more conversation about that. Stay with us.
To sharpen the biblical worldview of Christians and to share the good news of Jesus Christ. That is the mission of the Christian Worldview radio program. I'm host David Wheaton, inviting you to join us this Saturday morning at 9 Eastern, 8 Central, as we discuss all matters of life and faith from a decidedly biblical perspective. The Christian Worldview, Saturday mornings at 9 Eastern, 8 Central, right here on American Family Radio.
This is Steve Conover inviting you to listen to the Friends of Israel Today each week on this station. Here's our host and Bible teacher, Chris Katulka.
Hey everybody, the Friends of Israel Today is a unique radio show that teaches biblical truth for changing times. We do this through Q&A, timely interviews, dramatic readings from the life of Holocaust survivor Zvi Kalisher, and of course, Bible teaching.
To learn more, visit foiradio.org.
Join us for Friends of Israel Today, Sunday morning at 11:30 Central on American Family Radio.
Netflix continues to ignore the outcry about 13 Reasons Why. The American Family Association, along with Parents Television Council and several other pro-family groups, have reached out to the streaming service urging the cancellation of their program. Netflix has not even responded to our letter. Instead, they released an even more vile Season 2 and are producing Season 3. Netflix CEO Reed Hastings says their program is engaging and that it fosters discussion of taboo topics like suicide and sexual assault. But at what cost? 14-year-old Anna Bright and several other teens have committed suicide after watching the show. Hastings calls our objections propaganda. Does he feel the profitability of his company is worth more than the lives damaged or lost because of his show? Please sign our petition to Netflix, learn more, and share our action alert when you visit afa.net. And pray Reed Hastings will recognize the dangers of 13 Reasons Why.
American Family Radio. You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. Focal Point, Brian Fisher.
Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point on American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name. 9th anniversary. Focal Point started 9 years ago today. Number to call if you want to join us on our 9th anniversary show here in the last quarter hour is 888-589-8840. 888-589-8840. And going back just for a moment to the level of tension and animosity that's coming at conservatives from the left. This is Alan Dershowitz, clip number 7. I don't know Alan Dershowitz. I've just seen him on TV. He's been a guest on this program a few times. Seems like a really terrific guy to me. I can't imagine anybody in the world having a reason to hate him. But here's what he had to say about his elitist friends on Martha's Vineyard. This is where the hoity-toity hang out. This is where the bourgeoisie hangs out. And so these are people that are supposed to be the elite among us, very refined, very sophisticated, very highly educated. And this is what Alan Dershowitz says about all of that.
You know, people talk about parties as if that's something serious. I don't care about parties. I'm invited to too many. But at a party this week on Martha's Vineyard, a woman said, if Dershowitz were here tonight, I'd stab him through the heart. This is a Martha's Vineyard woman saying she would stab me through the heart.
Okay, that's Alan Dershowitz. That's the kind of threats that he's getting from liberals. Remember, these are the people that are always telling us how mean we are and how hateful we are and how bigoted we are. And I would submit to you that the fountain of hate and bigotry and prejudice is almost universally confined to the left side of the political spectrum. Now let's drop back to clip number 5. This has to do with kind of a political issue. You know, what we're seeing is a real sea change, I believe, in the makeup of the electorate. And one of those changes is in the black community. I think we're having some real seismic shifts in the black community. We had Candace Owens on yesterday, a soundbite from her yesterday talking about the shifting allegiances on the part of black Americans. Now here is Craig Melvin talking, or this is Candace Owens talking with Craig Melvin on MSNBC about what she believes is going to happen by 2020 with the black vote.
Are you asserting that all of a sudden there are millions of new black Donald Trump supporters that we didn't know anything about before?
They weren't Trump supporters to begin with, but we're seeing a shift, a major shift happen, and black supporters are leaving the left and going over to the right. You need but pay attention to the underground movement. And look, you are correct to say that just because a poll says something, it isn't right. The polls told us that Hillary Clinton was going to win, and she didn't, right? But I wasn't fooled by the polls. I thought that Hillary Clinton was going to lose. In the same way that I am also saying that I believe that black voters are going to exit the left completely by 2020.
Well, that's a pretty strong prediction that black voters are going to completely exit the left by 2020. That's just 2 years from now. But I think what we're seeing with the left is they have taken Democrats for granted. They have assumed that they've got a lock on the black vote. They've got no other place to go. It was unthinkable to them that they would ever turn Republican, turn conservative. But now they're realizing, you know, we have been following Democrats, voting for Democrats since forever, since the 1960s. What has it gotten us? We're still mired in poverty. We're still mired in racial tension. And then Donald Trump comes along, and all of a sudden our unemployment numbers are lower than they have ever been. Maybe Republicans have something to offer us. And this, I believe, is what Candace Owens is talking about. She sees this shift. She lives and moves in that community. So if that happens, if blacks begin to shift away from the Democratic Party in any significant numbers, it's going to be decades before the Democratic Party will be able to regain its former influence in the United States. Now here is Victor Davis Hanson, clip number 6. He's a historian at the Hoover Institution at Stanford University, lives in the Central Valley in California, where I used to live, where I grew up. I grew up in Fresno, and he lives just down the valley from us, I believe, in Hanford or Visalia. Anyway, that's irrelevant to anything. But Victor Davis Hanson is talking about some of the shifts that have happened politically and how the never-Trumpers have basically been reduced to complete irrelevance. Remember, these are the people that were against Trump from day one, and they stayed against Trump. They never wavered. They never waffled. They've been still against Trump. They're still writing columns against Trump. The Bill Kristols and the Stephen Hayeses, and you've got the Jonah Goldbergs, and they are still saying mean, nasty, hateful things about Donald Trump, still writing columns. And here's Victor Davis Hanson's take on that and the never-Trumpers.
Barack Obama got elected twice, but he was an ungodly disaster for the Democratic Party. They lost the supermajority, they lost the Senate, they lost the House, they lost 1,000 local and state offices. They're going to lose the Supreme Court, and they can't come to grips with the fact that they control popular culture, sports, universities, and media, but that translates into this type of street theater you reference. It doesn't transfer into actual political power, and they're very frustrated. And then the second thing is, everybody said Trump was good. The never-Trumpers told us that Trump would be a moderate or a liberal. He wasn't. The Heritage Foundation said he was more conservative in his first 2 years than Ronald Reagan. The left said he was going to implode, or the Mueller investigation, or impeachment, or the emolument clause, or they were going to sue under the 25th. None of that happened. So Trump is almost 50% approval rating. And then the final thing, there's no alternate agenda. We don't know what your speaker, your guests, what do they feel about taxes? They want more government, more regulation, less? Is the Iran deal good or bad? We don't hear any of that. Instead, they fixate on somebody like Ms. Ocasio-Cortez, a kind of an obscure 28-year-old who won an election with 20% turnout, and suddenly that's a metaphor for a brave new world. So it's a frustration that they don't translate their cultural influence into actual raw political power.
So that's an issue on both the left and the Never-Trumpers. You know, what is the agenda of the Never-Trumpers? That's a good question. What do they want to have happen that's different than what's happening under Donald Trump? We don't know. They don't really have an articulated program, an articulated agenda. Same with the people on the left. What are they for? We don't know. We just know that they're against Donald Trump.
Yeah.
And what's that?
Oh, I'm thinking their new slogan for the midterms is "Make America Hate Again."
Yeah.
You know, all the vitriol and the bad things they've been saying.
Yeah.
That's all they've got.
Yeah, and you even have some people on the left, we played the sound bites, they believe that's all they need. All they need is a hate Trump message, and they'll win, because everybody they think dislikes Trump as much as they do, and that is not going to get it done. 888-589-8840. Let's grab a couple of phone calls. Let's go to Nelson in Killeen, Texas. Nelson, welcome. What's on your mind?
How are you doing, Brian? I'm glad that you gave me an opportunity. First, I want to tell Nancy that I will include her in our prayers in our church tonight service.
Thank you.
And second, now that all of the attention orchestrated by the left, the collusion and all this nonsense and all this money that we spent, I wonder if now we can direct attention to some public figure that really hurt us, which is Miss Hillary. When are they going to turn the focus around and bring this lady to justice?
Mm-hmm.
And and I just wanted to say that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, I think that's a legitimate concern, Nelson. She really should be in jail right now for what she did with her emails. She broke any number of federal laws, committed felonies, numerous felonies in the process, and she really should be being prosecuted by the special counsel, or the IG should be referring her for prosecution. All right, Nelson, good call. Let's go to Calvin in Paducah, Texas. Calvin, we got a short amount of time left. I'd like to ask everybody to be as concise as you can. I got about 3 more calls I'd like to wedge in. So if you can be concise as you can, Calvin, we'll see how many calls we can squeeze in. What's on your mind?
Oh, I just wanted to let you know that we're going to start a coalition here. All the men in America need to go to their local Social Security office and tell them that they identify as a 72-year-old male and they want their Social Security started tomorrow.
Well, why not? Because the left keeps telling us you can self-identify as anybody you want, and everybody else is obligated to accept your self-identification. So if you say you're 72 and you're eligible for Social Security, who are they to say you are not? All right, Kelvin, creative thinking, like the way you're thinking out there. Let's go to Larry, Waynesboro, Tennessee. Larry, talk to me. What's on your mind?
Hello, Brian. Listened to you since day one, and where I started listening to you, I was driving a forklift up at an Amish sawmill.
Wow.
And I kept kidding them. I had a headset, and I kept kidding them. They'd ask me what I was listening to, and I told them Amish Family Radio. But,
AFR.
Hanging there.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, Larry. I appreciate that. Let's grab a call from Anna in Dublin, Georgia. Anna, welcome. What's on your mind? Talk to me.
Hey, I was just calling in. Y'all said y'all liked the lady for Supreme Court. I thought I would, too, until she said she would recuse herself on any case that it involved her faith. And pretty much any case involved abortion, homosexuality, will involve her faith. We don't need anybody else that's going to recuse themselves. So I think they need to go with them 2 guys. I hadn't heard them say they would recuse themselves because of their faith.
All right, Anna. Well, listen, I appreciate the call. I had not heard that, and I've not read that. Maybe if that broke this morning, I didn't have a chance to see it. I'll look into that when the program is over. I don't think she would recuse herself on an abortion issue. She hasn't done that before. I don't think she would as a judge. All right, last call of the day, Angela in Mountainburg, Arkansas. Angela, got about 20 seconds. Hit me with your best shot.
I thought I heard you say something about in California they're trying to pass a law to where they can do experiments on the foster children that aren't sure if they're male or female, letting them have surgery if they're boy or girl, change their monkey to a whatever.
Yeah, they are, Angela, and I appreciate the call. And the law in California actually has to do with just children, that their parents cannot veto hormone therapy, surgical therapy, They have to be allowed to pursue their own understanding of gender identity regardless of what the parents think. Well, that's it. Thank you for being with us for 9 years. God bless you. Have a great weekend. See you on Monday.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast may not necessarily reflect those of the American Family Association or American Family Radio.
Faith, family, freedom.